Support for this show comes from Prime Video, makers of Fallout. Have you seen Fallout? It's amazing. It's what a great show. It was just nominated for 17 Emmy Awards. And if you're a Television Academy member, go to consideramazon.com and you can get it for free. You can watch it and you can vote for it and you can make everybody's lives happy.
Hi, this is Judd Apatow. I'm on Don't Be Alone with Jake Hogan because he wouldn't allow me not to be.
Don't be alone with Jake Hogan.
Hello and welcome to Don't Be Alone with Jake Hogan, a show where I talk with funny, interesting people about my problems, and we come to almost no conclusion. So I hope you like a meandering show that goes nowhere because you got it. Here it is. No, I am very appreciative of all the audience members who've come out of the woodwork to listen to the show. We have been having great success on the internet with people listening to Don't Be Alone with Jake Hogan, and I really am grateful and thank you for being here and thank you for participating. And if you want to write in with a question or a comment, write into dbawjk@gmail.com. That's dbawjk@gmail.com with your questions or suggestions. A question for me and my guest that you don't know, some future guest. I will read it on the air, and eventually, when I get merchandise, I may wind up giving you a tchotchke of some kind. But right now, we don't have that. Right now, we're just a little show that's trying. That's not so bad. Anyway, this week we have the great writer, director, producer, and comedy expert and comedian, Judd Apatow. And Judd and I have had a long relationship, many, many years. And he is, I wouldn't say a protege, even though he says he's a protege of mine. That's not true. But we're kindred spirits of the comedy world. And we both have a love of stand-up comedy and both love talk shows, and both were sedentary children who did nothing but watch TV and therefore had no choice but to go into this industry. Judd is interesting, he's funny, he's open, and honestly, I really like him. So I'm looking forward to you liking him too, right after this.
Don't be alone with Jake Hogan.
Judd, thank you for being here. I have been bugging you for, I don't know, a while.
You thought I would just always elude you.
Yes.
Did you really think I would do it? Or you just thought, no, Judd's going to keep pushing it down the road?
I thought I'm very kick the can worthy. Let me just put it that way. It's not on you, it's on me. Yeah. I am very kick the can worthy. So yes, put Jay off, go further. But with the success of the Conan O'Brien episode, you just could not resist.
The show got hot and I needed a piece of it. Because I was living like by the water, like near Santa Monica. And so when you said where it is, because, you know, usually you want to force people to come to you. Right. I knew that there would be a drive. And basically you're giving away a half a day. Yes. That's what people don't get. It's a half a day.
I'm asking a lot of people and they're getting nothing in return. Honestly, you might be getting a cup. I'm getting some some things like a coffee cup. I'm just working it out. I'm going to show you the logo, see if you think it's working.
I'm one of the few guys who like that. I honestly am excited that I have an old like Craig Ferguson mug. Right. And I'll save it. We just moved and I have to say the family made sure a lot of it disappeared in transit.
God. I can't imagine. I only, I know you for many, many years, but no, I'm not like in the mishpucha of your I want to come in and clean out your house. I want to take, you have such a deep, vast archive of stuff. Some of it's wonderful, but I can only imagine the stuff that you've sent me in the email, like, hey, look at this note I found that was written in 1974 about your dad. It's like, if you have that, you must have garbage.
Here is a photo of me and Larry Bud Melman. I have all that stuff. In fact, I'm putting a book together now. Right. Yes. That's going to come out so people could look at my hoard.
But you have great stuff. You have a treasure trove of amazing things.
I have a drawing my grandfather got me that the guy who created E.T., Carlo Gumbaldi and it's a sketch of E.T. So stupid stuff like that, which, a couple of Jack Klugman interviews, a Hal Linden, you know, that kind of stuff.
You, in many ways, are a much, much better version of me. And I will say this. Like I'm a fan of comedy. I'm a fan of all these things. Larry Bud Millman, David Letterman. I showed up in the audience to those things. I tried to meet people when I was a kid, and I got autographs of Steve Martin, and I got autographs. Like I did all that kind of stuff, but I didn't keep a lot of it. Yeah,
I had the weird thought, keep it. I remember we had a rock and roll auction in high school for our high school radio station, and I bought a Phil Collins, his first solo album poster sign. But the obsession with keeping it safe, making sure no one touched it, having it rolled properly, and then I have most all of it. Some of it disappeared, but you had access. Your dad, legendary comedy writer,
I had access.
And so you met.
Right. I met everybody, but you created access. See, the difference is you were sort of a go-getter, and still to this day, that's one of the things I want to talk to you about. As you know, this podcast, Don't Be Alone with Jake Hogan, which is hugely successful now. I don't know if you know the ratings of the Conan O'Brien episode, hugely successful, but is about me inviting my friends to help solve my problems.
Okay.
And one of them is that you're very, very good at writing, directing. Yes. Yes. I'll give you that. Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
But you're also a primo producer. I don't think I know anybody who's as good a producer as you are.
Thank you.
And you have the ability, the drive, the chutzpah, whatever it takes to get it done. If it can get done, you'll get it done. And if you can't get it done, then something really got fucked up.
Yeah.
That's how I feel. And nobody's 100%, but unbelievable. I wish I had the wherewithal, whatever it is, the drive, and maybe it's because I grew up spoiled in Encino with my dad in show business. But you grew up with your dad looking from on the outside, looking in, think I got to get in there.
Yes.
And you're still have that fire in your belly to go do that. And
how do you get in that world?
Yeah.
But and I get that because our kids are in that world, and so you see it the other way. I mean, my grandmother's best friend was Totie Fields, who your dad probably wrote for.
Not probably, absolutely wrote for. And Totie was like an aunt to me.
Yeah, and she was hysterically funny.
Yeah.
So for people who don't know her, there's some funny stuff on YouTube of her on Ed Sullivan.
Right.
But, a chubby woman, a lot of self-deprecating jokes, but also could sing beautifully.
Yeah.
But riotously funny. If you look her up on the Mike Douglas show, there's an incredible clip of her with Gene Simmons from Kiss.
Yeah.
And she says, "Would it be wild if we found out underneath that was just a nice Jewish boy?" And then he kind of says something like, "Well, I forgot what his response was, maybe." And then she went, "Yeah, I could tell from the hook." But anyway, my grandma was buddies with her, so I would hear stories of we were at a party and we were friends with Stephen Eady or Bob Newhart, and so it seemed like there was a world somewhere.
It was reachable.
And I would go see her at Westbury Music Fair. And also she was a weird lady, and the audience loved her, and I just thought, oh wow, people can love you if you're that funny and charismatic. So that was the first thing, and I think that was very almost unconscious, my observation of it, wanting to be that person. I mean, it's a weird thing. It's almost like wanting to be your grandma's best friend.
Yes.
So that's part of my go-getter nature. It was also that my grandfather was a jazz producer and produced the first Janis Joplin record and Charlie Parker and people like that. And I always thought that he was cool. He's a hustler.
To meet any of those people or be around the recording studio or do any of that stuff?
I mean, I was in the office a little bit, but not really. Yeah. But when I was a kid, I started DJing in high school, and I would play these jazz shows to just try to understand, why did my grandfather like this music? Because when you're a kid, it's so weird.
Yes.
And you're listening Herbie Hancock, Bitches Brew.
Did you ever figure it out?
Things like that. Partially. And I thought, well, you just have to work hard to get in. My grandfather, I think the legend of it was he would just raise money, hire jazz musicians, record them, get the records printed, go to record stores, sell them literally individually. That's how he got in.
Sure.
And then slowly it became creating a label or joining a label. But the people he was recording, it was Dizzy Gillespie. It was Charlie Parker, in the late 40s, and somewhere in my head, same as the Totie Fields thing, I thought, oh, so you could do anything if you have balls.
Right. If you have balls, you can do it. Mm-hmm. I, on the other hand, had no balls.
When I met you, you were working at The Simpsons.
Yes.
and I was dating a young woman that was the ex-girlfriend of your partner at the time, and I was trying to figure out what was I going to do with my career. I was doing stand-up, but I really felt like other people were going to make it in a way I was not going to.
Right.
So I really loved it.
How insightful of you then. Most stand-up comedians don't have that insight.
It's the curse of a true comedy fan.
It's true.
Is that you can look yourself in the mirror and go, I'm not Jim Carrey. And whatever this is going to be is not enough.
Right. But you're good. But that's the thing. You're good enough. Like you're good. You just, that persona, that magic, that thing.
That whatever that made Bill Murray versus 10,000 other people who went to Second City. You just go, yeah, I'm going to be fun and I'll do some cool stuff.
Right.
But, then there's Eddie Murphy.
Right.
And so at some point I must have really given into the fact that I probably need to get a writing job. I was writing jokes for some comics, and someone explained, well, you just write an episode of a show you like, and that's your sample. And I think The Simpsons had been on one season, and also Get a Life had been on one season. So those were the two shows I wrote episodes of, and I sent them to agents, and I don't believe anyone would sign me. I sent it to every show. I only basically got two things out of it. One, David Merkin agreed to meet with me. He co-created Get a Life, and it was very nice, but didn't hire me or give me anything. And you took my script and gave it to the show, and people were very positive. But it was the first season of the show. You didn't need any new writers at The Simpsons, and I wasn't sure if people really liked it or it was just being nice. But then when the critic happened, which was after my first big job, the Ben Stiller Show, was canceled, Al Jean said, hey, we'd hire you over here. And that was a big deal, and that was all from you. And then 22 years later, I was doing an interview with Elvis Mitchell, and I told the story about my script, and I said what my script was about. And I said, in a way, every movie I've ever made is the same story as my first Simpsons script, because it was about Homer getting hypnotized at a show, and he thinks he's 10. The hypnotist dies, or no, hypnotist has a heart attack, and now he's 10, and he becomes friends with Bart in a real way. And he also doesn't want to be brought back to his real age.
Sure, who would? Yeah.
And then 22 years later, there was an article about this Q&A, and Al Jean must have read it, and he said, I'll make it now. And then, of course, they rewrote almost every word, but kept the story and the soul of it. Let me go to the table. Let me go to the recordings. And I had the magical Simpsons experience
of getting rewritten, and then hearing Harry Shearer complain. The magic.
It was also amazing because it really was the dream of how good the episode could be.
Yes.
It's actually a fantastic episode. And I say that having not written almost any of the dialogue, but I was so proud that what was soulful about the story, which is that Homer falls in love with his son at that age and doesn't want to leave his son at that age. It still was impactful.
That's the dirty secret of The Simpsons still, is that the stories really, the best ones, have something deep inside them, at the bottom of them, not just the jokes, but that they mean something. The best ones. And they're still doing that to this day.
And what was incredible was like to go to the show, and I had worked with Mike and Al, Mike Reese and Al Jean at The Critic, to go to the show, decades later, and see Al working, see all the writers. A lot of them have been there for decades.
Yes.
But their energy and enthusiasm is exactly the same.
Yeah.
There's no sense of like, oh God, get me the hell out of here. They love it. And
you should stick around a little bit longer, because there is a sense.
But for that long a time.
No, they're there.
The passion and the interest in making it great seemed exactly the same. And then I got to watch them do the voice record. And everyone was brilliant. But I did have a real moment where I was just watching Dan Castellaneta, and I thought, this is one of the greats of all time. This is Jackie Gleason level, like Charlie Chaplin level, brilliant. Seeing him just take the words and what he was doing with it, and everyone was doing it, but especially with Dan, I was like, I don't know if anyone realizes the gift this guy is. Dan, not Homer. What he did with it.
It's clear that this was a gift from God. And the other reason why it's a gift from God is, I don't know if you've ever had Dan Castellaneta audition for you for anything. He's terrible. He really is. He cannot get a fucking audition. Like he's not right for anything when he auditions for it. And yet he's perfect for it if you just give him the role. If you give him the role, he will knock it out of the park, whatever it is. But he can't audition for it.
Yeah, I get that. There's something about the whole audition process that brings out the worst of most people.
Yeah.
It's too pressurized. People don't know how to get the best out of you. I mean, I always feel like in auditions, I do a pretty good job because I do understand the stress everyone's under. And I will say to them, we're going to do it a whole bunch of times.
I do the same thing.
Let me know what you want to do.
Right.
Did you do it the way you wanted to do it?
Right.
And that's all people want.
Yeah.
Their nightmare is they do it once and you're like, thank you.
Right.
And you're like, wait, what the fuck just happened?
A great producer. I do the same thing, but probably not as well.
Sometimes you tell them something, it completely changes everything they're doing, and then they're great.
Yeah.
I've had that where people are terrible and you go, try that, but like maybe you're just like a little high.
Right. Right. Yeah.
And then suddenly you go, oh my God, that person's hysterical.
Also, you get to see that what it's like to work with this person and how quickly they jump on the idea. And so because that's everything. Because even when you think you have the perfect role for the perfect you do a reading and go, oh, we've changed it completely.
Yeah.
But the actor is good enough, he can roll with it, he can swing with it. Support for Don't Be Alone with Jake Hogan comes from Prime Video, makers of Mr. and Mrs. Smith, which just got nominated for 16 Emmy Awards, including Best Drama, including Best Actor, Donald Glover, Best Actress, Maya Erskine. It's an amazing, fun husband and wife spy thriller. You're going to love it. If you saw the movie, you think you've seen it, but you haven't seen it. This is completely different. It's wild, it's crazy, and it's much more now. It's now. That was then, this is now. Go watch it at consideramazon.com and you will love it. And you will impress your friends that you're a TV Academy member, because only TV Academy members can go watch the show at consideramazon.com. So go, enjoy it, and we'll be right back.
Don't be alone with Jake Hogan.
This is something that you've been able to do your whole career, which is amazing. You've been able to pick out talent, real talent, the best talent, and know who they are and sort of say, that person's great and I want to interview them on my radio show, or I want to work with them. Like, you've figured out, and I've never been able to do that. I'm the guy who discovers Jim Carrey after Jim Carrey has been discovered.
You just figured it out at like the Truman Show.
Exactly. Oh, he's pretty good. Oh my gosh, what a good actor. No, I see people sometimes and it hits me, but it's not. You have a coterie of people that you've discovered, or at least helped bring forward, that are amazing talents who have become filmmakers and film writers on their own, and like to take Seth Rogen and say, yeah, come on, kid, you can write movies and that's not a problem. And Superbad is just one of the best movies of all time. And not mention Pineapple Express, not to mention all the other. It's great. And what's the thing?
Well, I mean, when I was a little kid, I watched so much TV because I was a bad athlete. So I'd just be home all afternoon while my friends were out.
Me too, yeah. And
so I would watch the Mike Douglas Show, Dinah, Merv Griffin, and the Tonight Show. And just, I always say, it's like when someone likes baseball and they just remember the players and they're tracking them. I'm tracking like, young Michael Keaton or Leno, in the late 70s. And so that was the thing I was interested in. Who's good, who's not, who do I get excited because I'm going to see them again? And so everything I've done is as simple as, you meet someone and you just go, if Seth was the lead in the movie, I'd go to that movie. Right. I mean, he was way ahead of it. I mean, Evan Goldberg and Seth were writing Superbad when they were like 13, 14 years old. They had an idea that the movie that they want did not exist and we're going to make it exist. So that had zero to do with me. But when we were doing Freaks and Geeks and we hired Seth and thought he was hilarious, where we realized how gifted he was every once in a while a scene wouldn't work and we would take him in the office with the actress and we would say, let's just riff on it a little bit. Let's see if we can figure out how to make this moment work. And the way he riffed screamed, oh, this is a great writer. Like no one does it like this. It shouldn't get that good this fast. And I think with everyone, as I get older, I think it's not really like discovering people. It's just believing in people and wanting to see what's possible, right? So a lot of people had done great things, and it's like, can we get them all the toys? Yeah.
We just watched 40-Year-Old Virgin. Brown and I just watched the 40-Year-Old Virgin. It holds up. It's really great. Oh my gosh. It's fantastic.
Very sincere. And that's the first thing that we thought when Steve told me the idea, because it was based on a sketch he had never completed at Second City. What if we took this very seriously? What if we made this a really three-dimensional person with a big heart who is very frustrated and having a problem and treated it seriously? Maybe then that would make it way funnier.
Yeah, it's funny, but it's also not just a joke. Yeah. It's a guy who wants to find love and wants to figure it out and has lived in fear and has broke through all the stuff that's none of it's funny. Yeah. That's not funny, but that's real. But it's built an engine that's very funny. And that was great.
And I remember, at the Improv, there was this guy who hung out all the time, this older guy, a little hostile. And once I was watching TV.
Gary Belkin?
I wish I remembered his name. All right. But I just remember watching like Sally Jesse Raphael or something, and it said, 38-year-old virgin. And it was the guy who was always at the Improv.
Right.
And the thing I remember, like, he was a little edgy.
Yeah.
He wasn't a wallflower.
Right.
He wasn't scared. He was kind of almost nasty. And so there were little touches of that with Steve where he's sweet, but he also would like start screaming at you. Yeah. And so that was a good.
Did you hang out at the Improv a lot?
Yeah. I mean, I would visit when I was a kid, and for some reason you could go to the Improv when you were underage.
Absolutely. I did all the time.
Yeah. So like a lot of places you couldn't. In New York, you could go to Caroline's, which had a supper club I used to go to and see Gilbert Gottfried and Pee Wee Herman perform. So I would go to the Improv all the time. So that was the dream from like evening at the Improv, was can you get in at the Improv? And so I was living with Adam Sandler. I did an audition for Bud. I did not pass. Then 5 months later, I was with Adam hanging out at the Improv, and somehow I convinced Mark Lanow, the other owner, to let me on. And he liked me, and he let me in, not Bud.
Right.
So it took a while to get Bud on the train fully.
Sure.
But I was the house MC from like 1988 to 92. And I'd be there from like 8 till 1:30 in the morning, 4 or 5 nights a week. Everyone was there. It was Robin Williams and Leno and Ellen. And
you were there just after me. I was doorman at the Improv.
Oh, wow.
For a few years prior to that. And they used to let me perform 3 in the morning, the last slot, and do my terrible stand-up comedy, which also affirmed the idea that I probably should be a writer.
Well, you might have been there. Like, was Andy Kaufman still around when you were doing that?
Yes.
Wow.
Yes. And Leno was there, and Seinfeld, and Richard Lewis, and lots of the good people.
Right, as everyone was like breaking into TV.
Yes.
And it was so exciting, and I learned a ton, but I also was like, better start writing.
Yeah.
So I started writing for Taylor Negron. I remember writing some jokes for him, for George Wallace.
Yes.
And then I realized, the other comedians won't write for other comedians. They all want to be stars, but I don't think I'm going to become a star. So I'll take their money and pay my rent.
Yeah.
And then I realized, this is so fun. Because when you write for people, if it's going well, they love you.
Yeah,
because you're really helping them.
Yeah, and you write pages of stuff, and they don't take them all, but they take the good ones, or the ones that they think are the good ones, and then you can resell the ones that they didn't take. But it's a great exercise actually for a writer, because you're ultimately writing in the voice of somebody.
Yeah.
And so if you're figuring out how to write in the voice of somebody, that you're figuring out how to write in character, and you're figuring out how to make TV shows and movies that way too.
Absolutely.
So,
and then that turned into writing sketches.
Yep.
So what we wrote, the Ben Stiller show first season got canceled quickly.
I was there briefly,
but that was a fun moment.
Yeah, no, that was an amazing show. I remember an ex-girlfriend of mine was on that show, who is now dead, Salt and Pepper. Yes. Real name, everybody, Salt and Pepper.
Yeah, she was great.
And
very nice.
Such talented. It was clear that the show you were making was filled with really talented people. Yeah. Ben, not the least of them. And it was also clear that Fox had no idea what to do with it. They were never going to figure it out. And they never have. They never have figured out how to put live human beings in a comedy situation and make that work.
It's funny because lately when I'm trying to sell things or get things going, and it's really hard, I'm like, this business has changed. And then I have to remember, like, no, in 1992, they hated the Ben Stiller show. Like it's kind of always been this like struggle to do interesting things, and how do you convince gatekeepers to do them?
It's a little harder now.
Or
comedy movies and comedy TV shows are getting kicked in the nuts. Yeah. See, that's the problem. Like, I think stand-up comedy is having a huge boom right now. Yeah. So individual voices are acceptable, but the idea of characters, narrative characters coming together to make something funny is apparently an anathema to America. And I don't understand that.
Well, I think it has to do with something that people don't really know about, which is, it used to be you'd make a movie, and if it made $50 million in the theater, it would usually make $50 million on DVD.
Right.
So if you made a movie for $10, $20 million and it made 50, it was a hit.
Right.
But now you don't get the DVD money. So now it's a bomb.
Yeah.
And nothing really replaced that DVD money to make it make sense to take those kind of risks. So now everyone's like, well, what should the budget of those be? And then streaming hits and everyone's like, well, do we want to see comedy at home because we're just all lazy and we like it? Or would I go to a theater? What would a movie need to get me off my ass?
Right.
And I think that's what we're all figuring out. So with Barbie, that's a comedy. I keep telling people, like, that's a comedy that made $1.6 billion. People do not go for the drama.
True.
So I think people still want it. But if you make way less of them, it's hard to prove they want it.
It seems like one a month, it gets a big audience, maybe. And all these other movies are like, well, we ran it in the theaters and now it's going to come to your TV set and that's going to be fine.
There's also a thing now where it used to be a movie would be in the theaters for about 6 weeks or something. Now, if a movie doesn't do great opening weekend, they think that the financial bet is to get it on streaming where they can sell it on streaming as fast as possible. So they'll pull it out of theaters after 2 weeks.
Because they've already done the advertising for it. So it's in people's, Fall Guy is in people's minds. So let's get it to people's homes right away.
So there's all sorts of forces making it tricky, but ultimately for the creators, you just got to find a way to do it. That's it.
But I'm rich and I won't pay $22 to see Fall Guy.
The only thing I spend money on is I will get every single app.
Yeah.
The amount of, I have 17 meditation apps.
Okay.
I don't meditate at all.
Right. That's trouble.
And I'll look on my thing and go, wow, you haven't used Calm in a while, but there's no part of me that says get rid of it. And it's the same with like getting MGM Plus or, you know, Mubi or whatever, Criterion streaming. Like, I'm happy to have all of them just because I have no other hobby.
I have one meditation app and it's really just an alarm.
That's
it's a
all you
bell.
use it for?
Yeah, it's like those that you know, Asian bell, the good ding, ding, whatever that. So that
Insight timer.
Yeah, something like that. Some kind of.
I got that one too.
And so that's all I do. But I don't need the other app. I don't understand why you have that. But
I like supporting the industry.
The app industry. They're good people.
Yeah. Well, every once in a while you get like a email and says, Apple subscription, you just renewed this app at $248 a year, and you're like, what the fuck app is that? I don't even know what app that is.
Yeah, no, I go back and I say I don't want I'll pay for the year because I blew the deadline, and then go back and say I cancel now.
Yeah.
So I've lost millions of dollars in apps and fees. It's terrible. I've enjoyed that you're going back to stand up on a more regular basis.
Yes.
Every now and then I come and see the Largo show or see you do stuff, and it's great. And so and it also, I'm probably going to do stand up again at some point too. It gives me hope that even if I wasn't good when I was 16, when I was first doing it when I was 16, I was okay, but I had no persona.
Yes.
Now I can at least be whatever this persona is and be okay with it.
Yeah, you have something to say. Yes. You have life experience. And I always joke that it's hard for me to do stand up because I'm not that opinionated and I'm not that annoyed or angry, and I'm also not that interesting. I'm not like Stephen Wright, you know? So like to find that space where you're funny, but it's not driven by rage. No. It's not driven by, I have all the answers.
It's driven by observation, by truth. You're a guy who has insight into certain truths, and that's great.
Yeah.
And then, you know, and that's enough. And if it's relatable to people, and it generally is, then you get a laugh.
I like to say that I'm the Michael Jordan of comedy, but Michael Jordan when he played baseball, because no one wants me to do it.
Sure.
No one understands why I do it, but I won't stop.
People want you to do it. I think you do it. I think, first of all, you give money to charity.
Every show, for the last 10 years at Largo. They're all charity shows.
You've raised a shit ton of money for a lot of great things. So that right then and there, it's good. You feel good being at the show.
Yes.
And then on top of that, you always have, you're funny, but you always also have great performers and other people who are there. It's a great show. If people have a chance to come see your show at Judd Apatow and Friends at the Largo, they must go see it.
Yeah, we had a good one this week with Craig Robinson.
Yep.
He just was so funny.
He is funny.
He had the whole place singing. He kind of basically did like a 20-minute medley of just any song he was singing about and then had everyone sing with him.
That's fantastic.
And it was a level of euphoria in the crowd that I've almost never seen before, how much they were enjoying that.
Music, and music's a big part of your life too. Yeah. Music hits in such a different way than comedy does.
Yes.
In a special, magical way. Part of me wishes I was this great musician more than a comedy guy.
Always. I always wish I could write a song, and I always wish I could be a musician at this age who could just play the hits from his career.
Right.
Because when you get older in comedy, you can't bring the last project into the next project. So it doesn't matter. The next project is an experiment. It might work. It might humiliate you and bomb.
Right.
You can't just go, I'm going to play 20 songs and 8 of my greatest hits and the show will go well.
Right.
You're literally starting over every single time.
Yeah.
Don't be alone with Jake Hogan.
What do you think about this? I've had a thought about this, which is there's an age out of comedy. There's certain people, we may be one of them, I may be one of them, that ages out of comedy because it's adorable when they're young and fun, and it's kind of not so adorable when they're older, and it's like, what's going on?
It does change. I mean, there's certainly people have a spirit when they're young, and some people, they age. Some people age better. Mark Maron, he's built to be older.
Yes.
Colin Quinn is built to be older.
Right.
And there are certain
they were just old complaining, guys, period.
They just had old souls and just what they're talking about, it just like they're in prime right now. Right. I was talking on stage the other night about how 56 is a bad age to do comedy because my kids are in their 20s. It's not like dating stories. Right. It's not youthful. So all jokes are about decay. So all jokes are like, don't you hate when you have diverticulitis? Don't you hate when you fart during a CAT scan? And you don't want to be that guy.
Mm-hmm. Right. But you have other observations of life that aren't necessarily isolated to somebody who's 56. Yeah. But I do think that if you can't, like Jim Carrey, who is an amazing talent, I'm not sure we want to see Jim Carrey do, Ace Ventura, like a 65-year-old man do Ace Ventura, because
that's the question, and you don't know, because he's doing Sonic the Hedgehog right now, and he found a way to be like this villain, and do his thing, But he's not a young man. It's not young man, Dumb and Dumber.
Yeah,
Sandler's thing has evolved great. We made a joke in Funny People where his character George Simmons said, I'm getting older, I got to transition into my Walter Matthau period. But he did. He had his young silly, and he's found a way to be really deep and hilarious. In a way, he's like our Nicholson now.
Well, that's why I wanted you here, so I could ask you, will you get Sandler on the show?
Of course, it's done. It's
I need him
done
to get here because I have to have another Conan moment. And otherwise, I'm doomed.
Who really drives the ratings in the podcast world?
Other podcasters, I guess. If I could get Mr. Beast to be on here, oh my God.
So it is really like people who have a podcast following get, like if you get Dax Shepard, that would be big.
Or you'll go on their podcast and then talk about your podcast. They'll go, oh, let me check it out. But no, I see. But I'm not invited to anybody's podcast. We now have to go to a section of our show we call Question Time.
Okay.
It's question time.
It's almost been 30 years since The Cable Guy was released. Does he feel audience feelings about the movie have changed in that time?
Well, the great thing about The Cable Guy, as time has passed, is people still talk about it and watch it. When it came out, there was such an expectation that it would make so much money because all the Jim Carrey movies had made so much money. And also it was the first movie that maybe broke the style of what his other movies were comedically. And we thought that we would be given the greatest reviews of all time because we were doing this weird dark comedy that was almost like Unlawful Entry or Hand That Rocks the Cradle type of movie. And then we took this beating, and it threw us because we loved the movie so much.
Right.
So that's what hurts your confidence, because you go, wait, but I love it.
Right.
Am I wrong? Am I crazy? And Garry Shandling was friends with Warren Beatty at that time. And he said, you should go talk to Warren. So I had lunch with Warren Beatty, and he said, you know, you never know if what you've done is good for 10 years. Like you literally don't know. You'll know in 10 years if people are still talking about it, but it requires that distance.
Right.
And so now, you know, I guess it's 28 years since The Cable Guy came out. You know, it's still in the conversation as a fun thing.
Yeah.
And now when you look back, it's not that dark. At the time they talked about like it was so dark. It's like not dark at all. And it also did predict a lot of what's happened, because it was about losing your mind with too much television and media. And he had these long monologues about, one day you're going to be able to combine your television, phone, and computer, and you'll be able to play video games with a friend in Vietnam. You know? And that is the world today. So there's something funny about it in retrospect.
Yeah. I'm of the firm belief that the audience as a whole knows nothing. The audience in the niche knows everything. So that if people come up to you, I don't care whatever it is that you find your greatest failure or sadness, somebody will come up to you and say, I love that movie. It's the greatest thing I ever saw in my life. And you know right then and there, like, it is the greatest movie that person ever saw in their life for them. And I feel strongly that there's movies that I made a movie called The Wrong Guy that nobody saw and I love, and I will say maybe it's the best thing I've ever done or ever will do, and it doesn't matter that no one knows about it and they don't care. It's like the people who've seen it, you saw it, I saw it, I got to make it and see it, and I love it. And so the audience doesn't matter, because it's not, yes, I would love to reap the wealth, millions of dollars from being the creator of something, but creatively, none of that matters.
I agree. And early in my career, when I had a lot of shows getting canceled quickly that I liked, I always thought about that. Like, oh, maybe this is like indie TV. Like we're like The Replacements or Elvis Costello, and we're never going to sell more records than Mariah Carey. But for those people, that's the thing that they love and go
you were
crazy
right,
for.
by the way. You're right. Freaks and Geeks is still like, people, I don't know how many people talk about it as a touchstone for them. Still a show, same thing. I mean, these are great shows, and they stand the test of time. I hate saying that, because then I'm giving you props where I really don't want to. You don't want to give me props. Yeah.
Like the one that makes me laugh the most is Walk Hard.
Yes.
So Walk Hard is like goofing on Ray and Walk the Line and all these music biopics, and it did terrible when it came out, but we like love it. But it did so bad, like, you know, less than $3 million opening weekend on a lot of screens. But as the years passed, people kept writing about it. And then it was always on streaming. And then every time a music biopic, like the Queen biopic or the Bob Marley or the Amy Winehouse, people write these incredible articles saying you can't make these movies anymore because Walk Hard pointed out how they're made too well.
Right.
And there was one article that said, people don't really talk about Ray and Walk the Line anymore, but they do talk about Walk Hard.
Yes.
And I don't even know if that's true, but it made me so happy because it broke our heart that it didn't have that first window of appreciation. But now it's among the things that people like the best. And I was about Harold and Maude. Harold and Maude bombed, got terrible reviews, and it's one of my favorite movies of all time.
Great movie.
And you get a couple of those where if you're still around, you're like, oh, wow, that one's still here.
I have told Jake Kasdan that Walk Hard is one of my favorite movies. I don't think I ever told you, because again, I didn't want to give you the satisfaction.
Don't do it.
The satisfaction. But one of the most bonding movies I ever had with my son was the two of us watching that movie. And not only is it particularly well made and super funny, the music's good. Like the music's really good and well done. And it's like, that's magic. You're doing a musical biopic of music that doesn't exist, and you made it great.
Yeah, well, Jake and Mike Andrews really put together a team of so many people. And that was the fun of it, was can you make that music good? The funny thing is, if you didn't listen to the lyrics, they're all great songs.
Yes.
They're like hit songs, but then you listen to the words, and they're ridiculous.
There's one of the artists on the thing is called Little Nutsack, I believe.
Little Nutsack. Well, that was a funny bit because it was that someone took Dewey Cox's song Walk Hard, used the sample in the filthiest rap you've ever heard. And I mean, that joke has been done since then, but it hadn't been done at that point.
It's fantastic.
And it was a really fun version of that.
It's a great movie and stands the test of time. I can watch it. I see it on clips on the interweb, and it's really good. It's really good. Congratulations on that.
Thank you, sir.
This is a question. Now we're going to move on to. This is a great question. This is now listener mail.
Now it's time for listener mail.
This is a question that was given to me by a listener who did not know who the guest was going to be. It's just listener mail. Okay. So this is from Holly, who says, if you had a meeting or online interaction with someone who has a certain amount of notoriety or fame, and the person was a jerk, how can you separate his work from the way he treated you?
That's a very good question. Well, everyone has a bad day. I always feel bad for people who are insanely famous.
Right.
Where every time they walk out the door, every single person that encounters them wants to talk to them.
Right.
And, you know, we all have those days where we are not in the mood for anything. And so the one time you're a jerk, that person will remember that and tell everyone for the rest of their life. So I tend to try to give people a break for the most part.
Okay. But what about the person that is actually a jerk? Like this
that is a jerk.
The person you've dealt with who actually is a jerk and whose work you may have truly loved before you met them.
You're clearly talking about Kevin Spacey. I was listening to some of his interviews because he's doing a lot of interviews.
Yeah,
lately.
sure.
And in a way, he's probably a good example
an apology
of this.
tour for not having done what he was accused of.
Yeah. Can we enjoy LA Confidential in the same way anymore?
Right.
And it was interesting to hear him because he's older now. People forget like he's older.
Yeah.
And, you know, he talks kind of quiet and he's really trying to understand himself and his problems and the ways he's hurt people's feelings. It's a funny level that people get to where they've clearly done terrible things, potentially criminal things, but they talk about it like, you know, yeah, I was rude. You know, like they just minimize it enough to not get sued or go to jail.
I'm so sorry for my rudeness. Yeah.
You know, but but it is like beyond the level that they want it to be. And there's a part of me that's like, I feel bad for broken people. I feel bad for traumatized people. I feel bad for hurt people who hurt people. And at the same time, I don't feel bad. I feel like, oh, you really mess people up. Like people like him don't understand. Like when you grope the young actor, a lot of those people quit the business.
Sure.
Like you think
lives.
You think you're just trying to get laid with some naive person, but they see the entire world of show business as unsafe, and they leave and cause massive amounts of destruction. So I try to be aware of both. None of it is my decision. I mean, people are human and do bad things.
Regardless, I mean, whether we believe the Michael Jackson things or whatever, we believe Woody Allen or whatever that is. Like we watched Annie Hall a few months ago. It's amazing.
Here's my thing. I'm fine with everyone as soon as they're dead. You know, the second Michael Jackson's dead, I might be able to listen to the music.
Right.
I was doing a stand-up bit about how a lot of those songs are written by this English writer, this white guy named Rod Temperton, and he wrote a lot of the big Michael Jackson songs. So whenever I want to listen to Michael Jackson, what I think is I'm listening to the music of Rod Temperton, and I'm not going to not listen to Rod Temperton's work because Michael Jackson screwed it up.
You know that Rod Temperton is a serial killer.
That's a different Rod Temperton.
No, that's the Rod Temperton, the music guy. He's just killed.
No, he's not. Yes, he is not.
He's murdered children. You didn't know about this?
I didn't realize it was a double whammy situation.
No. Rod Temperton, I'm lying completely. Rod Temperton is fine, as far as I know.
Yeah. But I don't remember, what was your question? What do I do about those people?
I mean, this is the question. How do you separate the artist from the art, or can you, or should you bother? Like if there's a comedian, like in the process of working with somebody, I have met people who are just complete assholes. And there are people who I will not.
Well, there's the criminal or the really hurting people thing, right?
Yeah.
Like people who are like sexual abusers and things like that. And that's one category that shouldn't be tolerated in any way. Then there's just like jerks.
Right.
I remember when we were working at the Larry Sanders Show, you know, Garry at times was not unpleasant because his bar was so high. And if you wrote a bad script, you were going to have a rough day.
And often if you wrote a good script, you might have a rough day because he would view it as a bad script.
Yeah, and he was tired. And he knew that if the script was bad, he'd have to deal with it. Like, so you were really like making his life worse if he had to fix your script. And you're right. Sometimes maybe you did write a good script, but for whatever reason, with his taste, he did not like it.
Correct.
And so in the writer's room, we would always talk about, would you rather work with a jerk who's a genius or someone mediocre who's super nice? And I remember John Marcus, who ran the Cosby Show, was in that room, and we would debate that. And I was always like, I'd rather work with a jerk every single time.
Right.
But that's a big difference, like a pain in the ass person, or like a sensitive, overly reactive person, which is usually what it is, and like an actual abusive person. I didn't have that experience. I worked for Roseanne and Tom for a while, and it was very emotional, but they were really nice. But every once in a while, they might. I asked for a raise once, and they called me up and just cursed me out on my answering machine. I wish I saved it. Right. And then I talked to them, and they were like so mad for asking for a raise. And then an hour later, Tom called back. Fine, we'll give it to you. So, but that was still, they were nice.
Sure.
They were just artists.
Yeah, there are people who are artists, and there are people who I just think are unforgivable. And so I don't know. I mean, I also grew up with people like Carol Burnett and Bob Newhart and people who are delightful and real professional and also great.
Yeah, Bob Newhart, I did a documentary about that's on the New Yorker website that's called Bob and Don, A Love Story. And it's basically Bob Newhart talking about how much he loves Don Rickles and how much he misses him. And he wants people to remember him.
Right.
And spending that time with Bob Newhart was the best time ever. He called me and said, will you do this with me? And I thought, he's one of the big reasons I'm in comedy. I'll do anything that he wants to do. And so I spent, a bunch of time with him and his wife talking about Rickles.
How lucky.
And it was such a special time. I'm so glad I did that. But you're right. Carol Burnett would do the Larry Sanders Show. She was so nice, it was almost like unfathomable that was possible, and then would crush it with Garry.
Right.
Like you did go, she is better than everybody.
Yeah, it's true. She's fantastic. So the last thing before we wrap up is the moment of joy.
A moment of joy.
What gives me joy these days? I think, I never really liked nature before, before COVID. I really enjoyed that showbiz was shut down during COVID. Right. It was nice to get a true break. It was nice for everything to...
I'm still on that break. Is that okay?
Yeah, it is. We all semi-are. Yeah. But it was funny because I would take walks, which I never did. I never understood walking. I would always hear every day at lunch, Lorne Michaels walks in Central Park for an hour and a half. And I always thought, what is he doing?
Right.
I never understood hiking. Like that always seemed like the worst thing you would ever do. But during COVID, I started taking these really long 1 hour, 2 hour walks. And after a while, I would look at a tree and be like, that's a cool looking tree. And then it turned into that bird. What? And then I started taking video of the birds. And it was like a part of my brain opened up that's always been so busy with other bullshit.
Right.
It doesn't even notice what you should be noticing.
Right.
And now that's all over. I don't think the birds are.
I look at the birds and the trees now, and I think they're all trying to kill us.
I think they were flying rats.
Exactly.
But there was a moment where I really felt like we're all in this together with the birds and the trees, and we're all the same. And I felt it like spiritually, like connected to it. And then it does go away so fast as soon as you have a deadline or someone gives you notes on your script and says it's bad.
I think in an earthquake, the things that's going to kill most people are trees.
So you don't like them?
I don't like. I think they're just. I think
is
they're
that
out to kill
true,
us.
or they just?
I just made it up, but I'm afraid when I drive down tree-lined streets here in Los Angeles.
I thought it was overpasses.
Yeah, this is not going to be. That's bad too. You don't want to be under an overpass or under a big tree.
Yeah.
In any of those big trees. Anyway, Judd, thank you for being here.
It happened.
I will say that I like you. I have liked you for many, many years.
And I thank you for launching my career. And at a moment when there was no reason to,
I didn't launch your career.
Something very, very kind for me.
I was happy to do it, but I didn't launch your career. I'm happy to, I'll take credit for it, But
you were a building block. Let's just can we give it building block?
You can say whatever you want to say. I will say that your talent launched your career, and you remain to be incredibly talented. And I respect the fact that you give back and you find great talent and you work on amazing things like documentaries, and you give tribute to the thing that we both love, comedy, so much. You do it more than anybody else, and I think it's fantastic. So thank you.
Thank you. I'm glad I didn't blow you off.
You didn't blow me off. All right, and thank you for being here, audience. If there's anybody left after Conan's left, but thank you for being here, and thank you for not being alone. And we'll see you next time.
Don't